Welcome so much, Boys and Girls Club family members. It's me again here. We are going through our book, James and the Giant Peach. If you do not have a copy of this, please come stop by the club. You can grab you a copy as well so you can read along and join with us. Coming to you pre-recorded now. I was just so eager to get this out. I just wanted to just get through this book and finish as much as I can. So we're going to be trekking through chapters today. We're starting with chapter 10. First off, this video is posted at 12 o'clock every day. So Monday through Friday, just a reminder, we're serving our lunches from 12 to 1:30, and then our suppers are served from 4 to 5:30, and that's Monday through Saturday. So let's jump right into this. So excited. We're starting off with chapter 10 of James and the Giant Peach. It was quite a large hole, the sort of thing an animal about the size of a fox might have made. James knelt down in front of it and poked his head and shoulders inside. He crawled in. He kept on crawling. This isn't just a hole, he thought excitedly. It's a tunnel. The tunnel was damp and murky, and all around him there were curious, bittersweet smells of fresh peach. The floor was soggy under his knees, the walls were wet and sticky, and peach juice was dripping from the ceiling. James opened his mouth and caught some of it on his tongue. It tasted delicious. He was crawling uphill now, and as through the tunnel were leading straight towards the very center of a gigantic fruit. Every few seconds he paused and took a bite out of a wall. The peach flesh was sweet and juicy and marvelously refreshing. He crawled on for several more yards, and then suddenly, bang, on top of his head, bumped into something extremely hard blocking his way. He glanced up, and in front of him there was a solid wall that seemed at first as though it was made out of wood. He touched it with his fingers. It certainly felt like wood, except it was very jagged and full of deep grooves. "Good heavens," he said. "I know what this is. I've come to the stone in the middle of the peach." Then he noticed that there was a small door cut into the face of the peach stone. He gave a push. It swung open. He crawled through, and before he had time to glance up and see where he was, he heard a voice saying, "Look who's here." And another one said, "We've been waiting for you." James stopped and stared at the speakers, his face white with horror. He started to stand up, but his knees were shaking so much he had to sit down again on the floor. He glanced behind him, thinking he could bolt back into the tunnel the way he came, but the doorway had disappeared. There was now only a solid brown wall behind him. Chapter 11. James' large frightened eyes traveled slowly around the room. The creatures were sitting on chairs, others reclining on a sofa, and they were all watching him intently. Creatures, or were they insects? An insect is usually something rather small, is it not? A grasshopper, for example, is an insect. So what would you call it if you saw a grasshopper as large as a dog? As large as a dog? A large dog at that? You could hardly call that an insect, could you? There was an old green grasshopper as large as a large dog sitting on a stool directly across the room from James now. And next to the old green grasshopper there was an enormous spider. And next to the spider there was a giant ladybug with 9 black spots on her scarlet shell. Each of these 3 was squatting on a magnificent chair. On a sofa nearby, reclining comfortably in a curled up position, there was a centipede and an earthworm. On the floor over in the far corner there was something thick and white that looked as it might be a silkworm, but it was sleeping soundly and nobody was paying any attention to it. Every one of these creatures was at least as big as James himself, and in the strange greenish light that shone down from somewhere in the ceiling, there was absolutely terrifying to behold. "I'm hungry," the spider announced suddenly, staring hard at James. "I'm famished," the old green grasshopper said. "So am I," the ladybug cried. The centipede sat up a little straighter on the sofa. "Everyone's famished," he said. "We need food." 4 pairs of round, black, glassy eyes were all fixed upon James. The centipede made a wriggling movement with his body as though he were about to glide off the sofa, but he didn't. There was a long pause and a long silence. The spider, who happened to be a female spider, opened her mouth and ran a long black tongue delicately over her lips. "Aren't you hungry?" she asked suddenly, leaning forward and addressing herself to James. Poor James was backed up against the far wall, shivering with fright and much too terrified to answer. "What's the matter with you?" the old grasshopper asked. "You look positively ill." "He looks as though he's going to faint any second," the centipede said. "Oh my goodness, the poor thing," the ladybug cried. "I do believe he thinks it's him that we're wanting to eat." There was a roar of laughter from all sides. Oh dear, what an awful thought. You mustn't be frightened, the ladybug said kindly. We wouldn't dream of hurting you. You are one of us now. Didn't you know that? You are one of the crew. We're all in the same boat. We've been waiting for you all day long, the old green grasshopper said. We thought you were never going to turn up. I'm glad you made it. So cheer up, my boy, cheer up, the centipede said. And meanwhile, I wish you'd come over here and give me a hand with these boots. They take me hours to get them all off by myself. Chapter 12. James decided that this was most certainly not a time to be disagreeable. So he crossed the room to where the centipede was sitting and knelt down beside him. Thank you so much, the centipede said. You are very kind. You have lots of boots, James murmured. I have lots of legs, the centipede answered proudly, and lots of feet, 100 to be exact. There he goes again, the earthworm cried, speaking for the first time. He simply cannot stop telling lies about his legs. He doesn't have anything like hundreds of them. He's only got 42. The trouble is that most people don't bother to count them, so they just take his word. And anyway, there isn't nothing marvelous, centipedes about having lots of legs. Poor fellow, the centipede said, whispering in James' ears. He's blind. He can't see how splendid I look. In my opinion, the earthworm said, the really marvelous thing is to have no legs at all and to be able to walk just the same. You call that walking? Cried the centipede. You're a slitherer, that's all you are. You just slither along. I glide, said the earthworm primly. You are a slimy beast, answered the centipede. I am not a slimy beast, the earthworm said. I am useful and a much-loved creature. Ask any gardener you like. And as for you, I am a pest, the centipede announced, grinning broadly and looking round the room for approval. He is so proud of that, the ladybug said, smiling at James, though for the life of me I cannot understand why. I am the only pest in this room, cried the centipede, still grinning anyway. Unless you count old green grasshopper over there, but he's long past it now. He's too old to be a pest anymore. The old green grasshopper turned his huge black eyes upon the centipede and gave him a withering look. Young fellow, he said, speaking in a deep, slow, scornful voice, I have never been a pest in my life. I am a musician. Hear, hear, said the ladybug. James, the centipede said. Your name is James, isn't it? Yes. Well, James, have you ever in your life seen such a marvelous, colossal centipede as me? I certainly haven't. How on earth did you get to be like that? Very peculiar, the centipede said. Very, very peculiar indeed. Let me tell you what happened. I was messing about in the garden until under the old peach tree, and then suddenly a funny little green thing came wriggling past my nose. Bright green it was, and extraordinary beautiful, and it looked like some kind of tiny stone or crystal. Oh, but I know what that was, cried James. It happened to me too, said the ladybug. And me, Miss Spider said. Suddenly there were little green things everywhere. The soil was full of them. I actually swallowed one, the earthworm declared proudly. So did I, the ladybug said. I swallowed 3, the centipede cried. But who's telling this story anyway? Don't interrupt. It's too late to tell stories now, the old green grasshopper announced. It's time to go to sleep. I refuse to sleep in my boots, the centipede cried. How many more are there to come off, James? I think I've done about 20 so far, James told him. That leaves 80 to go, the centipede said. 22, not 80, shrieked the earthworm. He's lying again. The centipede roared with laughter. Stop pulling the earthworm's leg, the ladybug said. This sent the centipede into hysterics. Pulling his leg, he cried, wriggling with glee and pointing at the earthworm. Which leg am I pulling? You tell me that. James decided that he rather liked the centipede. He was obviously a rascal, but what a change it was to hear somebody laughing once in a while. He had never heard Aunt Sponge or Aunt Spiker laughing out loud in all the time he had been with them. We really must get some sleep, the old green grasshopper said. We've got a tough day ahead of us tomorrow, so would you be kind enough, Miss Spider, to make the beds? Chapter 13. A few minutes later, Miss Spider had made the first bed. It was hanging from the ceiling, suspended by a rope of thread at either end, so that it actually looked more like a hammock than a bed. But it was a magnificent affair, and the stuff that it was made of shimmered like silk in the pale light. I do hope you'll find it comfortable, Miss Spider said to the green grasshopper. I made it as soft and silky as I possibly could. I spun it with gossamer, That's a much better quality thread than the one I use for my own web. Thank you so much, dear lady, the old green grasshopper said, climbing into the hammock. Ah, this is just what I needed. Good night, everyone. Good night. Then Miss Spider spun the next hammock, and the ladybug got in. After that, she spun a long one for the centipede and an even longer one for the earthworm. And how do you like your bed, she said to James, when it came his turn, hard or soft? I think I like it soft, thank you very much, James answered. For goodness sake, stop staring around the room and get on with my boots, the centipede said. You and I are never going to get any sleep at this rate. And kindly line them up in neatly pairs as you take them off. Don't just throw them over your shoulder. James worked away frantically at the centipede's boots. Each one had laces that had to be untied and loosened before it could be pulled off. And to make matters worse, all the laces were tied up in the most complicated knots that had to be unpicked with fingernails. It was just awful. It took about 2 hours. And by the time James had pulled off the last boot and had them all lined up in a row on the floor, 21 pairs altogether, the centipede was fast asleep. Wake up, centipede, whispered James, giving him a gentle dig in the stomach. It's time for bed. Thank you, my dear child, the centipede said, opening his eyes. Then he got down off the sofa and ambled across the room and crawled into his hammock. James got into his own hammock, and oh, how soft and comfortable it was compared to the bare boards his aunts always made him sleep on at home. Lights out, the centipede said drowsily. Nothing happened. Turn out the light, he called, raising his voice. James glanced around the room, wondering which of the others he might be talking to. But they were all asleep. The old green grasshopper was snoring loudly through his nose, the ladybug was making whistling noises as she breathed, and the earthworm was coiled up like a spring at the end of his hammock, wheezing and blowing through his open mouth. For Miss Spider, she had made a lovely web for herself across the corner of one room, and James could see her crouching right in the center of it, mumbling softly in her dreams. She said, "Turn out the light," shouted the centipede angrily. Are you talking to me, James asked. Of course I'm not talking to you. The centipede answered, The crazy glowworm has gone to sleep with her light on. For the first time since entering the room, James glanced up at the ceiling, and there he saw a most extraordinary sight. Something that looked like a gigantic fly without wings, and it was at least 3 feet long. It was standing upside down on its 6 legs in the middle of the ceiling, and the tail end of the creature seemed to be literally on fire. A brilliant greenish light as bright as the brightest electric bulb was shining out of the tail, and the lighting was lighting up the whole room. Is that a glowworm? Asked James, staring at the light. It doesn't look like a worm of any sort to me. Of course it's a glowworm, the centipede answered. At least that's what she calls herself. Although actually you're quite right. She isn't really a glowworm at all. Glowworms are never worms. So they are simply lady fireflies without wings. Wake up, you lazy beast. But the glowworm didn't stir, so the centipede reached out of his hammock and picked one of the boots up off the floor. Put out that wretched light, he shouted, hurling the boot up at the ceiling. The glowworm slowly opened one eye and stared at the centipede. There is no need to be rude, she said, coldly, all in good time. Come on, shouted the centipede, or I'll put you out. Oh, hello, James, the glowworm said, looking down and giving James a little wave and a smile. I didn't see you come in, my dear boy. Welcome and good night. Then click, and out went the light. James Trotter lay there in the darkness with his eyes wide open, listening to the strange sleeping noises that the creatures were making all around him, and wondering what on earth was going to happen to him in the morning. Already he was beginning to like his new friends very much. They were not nearly as terrible as they looked. In fact, they weren't really terrible at all. They seemed extremely kind and helpful in spite of his shouting, arguing, and it went on between them. Good night, old green grasshopper, he whispered. Good night, ladybug. Good night, Miss Spider. But before he could go through them all, he had fallen fast asleep. Chapter 14. We're off, someone was shouting. We're off at last. James woke up with a jump and looked about him. The creatures were all out of their hammocks and moving excitedly around the room. Suddenly the floor gave a great heave, and as though an earthquake were taking place. Here we go, shouted the old green grasshopper, hopping up and down with excitement. Hold on tight. "What's happening?" cried James, leaping out of his hammock. "What's going on?" The ladybug, who was obviously a kind and gentle creature, came over and stood behind him. "In case you didn't note it, we were about to depart forever from the top of this ghastly hill that we've all been living on for so long. We're about to roll away inside this great beautiful peach to a land of, oh, what, asked James. "Never mind," said the ladybug, "but nothing could be worse than this desolate hilltop that these two repulsive aunts of yours." "Hear, hear," they all shouted. "You may not have noticed it," the ladybug went on, "but the whole garden, even before it reaches the steep of the hill, happens to be on a steep slope. And therefore the only thing that has been dropping is this peach from rolling away right from the beginning is a thick stem attached to the tree. Break the stem, and off we go." "Watch it," cried Miss Spider as the room gave another violent lurch. "Here we go." "Not quite, not quite." At this moment, continued the ladybug, "our centipede, who has a pair of jaws as sharp as razors, is up there trying to take the top off the perch by nibbling away at that stem. In fact, she must be nearly through it, if as you can tell from the way we're lurching about. Would you like for me to take you under my wing so that you won't fall over when we start rolling?" "That was very kind of you," James said, "but I think I'll be all right." Just then the centipede stuck his grinning face through a hole in the ceiling and shouted, "I've done it! We're off!" "We're off!" the others cried. "We're off!" "The journey begins," shouted the centipede. "And who knows where it may end," muttering the earthworm. "If you have anything to do with that, it can only mean trouble." "Nonsense," said the ladybug. "We are about to go on visit the most marvelous places, and when we see those wonderful things, isn't that so, centipede?" "There is no knowing what we shall see," cried the centipede. "We may see a creature with 49 heads who lives in the desolate snow, and whenever he catches a cold, which he dreads, he has 49 noses to blow. We may see the venomous pink spotted scrunch, who can chew up a man with one bite. It likes to eat 5 of them roasted for lunch, and 18 for his supper at night. We may see a dragon, and nobody knows that we won't see a unicorn there. We may see a terrible monsters with toes giving out the community affair. We may see the sweet little bitty bright hen, so playful, so kind and well loved, and such beautiful eggs you just boil them and then they explode as they blow off your head. A new and a rhinoceros, surely you'll see that the enormous and horrible gnat whose sting, when it stings you, goes in at the knee and comes out through the top of your hat. We may even get lost and be frozen by. We may even die in an earthquake or tremor. Or nastier still, we may be tossed on the horns of a furious dilemma. But who cares? Let us go from this horrible hill. Let us roll, let us bowl, let us plunge. Let us go rolling and bowling and spinning until we're away from old Spiker and Sponge. 1 second later, slowly, insidiously, almost gently, the giant great peach started to lean forward and steal into motion. The whole room began to tilt over, and all furniture went sliding across the floor and crashed the floor wall. So did James and the ladybug and the old green grasshopper, Miss Spider and Earthworm and the centipede, who had just come swiggling down the wall. Whew! Chapter 15, so much going on. James is now inside the giant peach. He meets the centipede, the earthworm. He meets the spider. These creatures that are now so large that he can talk to. Has to do something with the green flakes that he got spilled all over the ground. And now that he's inside the peach, they're going on some type of journey. Where are they going? What's going to be accomplished? What's going to happen during all this time? Well, to know and find out, you got to tune into our next broadcast as we explore the upcoming chapters in the book, James and the Giant Peach. Just want to thank you guys so much again. Please don't forget that whenever you're watching this, please share. Please get this message out there. Please leave a comment. Please share a memory that you have of James and the Giant Peach that is really fond for you. Don't forget that during this week, Monday through Friday, we are still serving lunches from 12 to 1:30, and that suppers are served from 4 to 5:30, and even on Saturdays as well. So don't worry, the Boys and Girls Club and our community partners, we've got you covered 6 out of the 7 days a week, and I'm pretty much sure that during one of those days you could probably pull a little bit over to cover the next day. But we're just so glad to be a help of an assistant to all those that are in need. Remember, let's join together, let's stay safe, we'll make it through this, and I can't wait to see you again. But till the next time, on our next chapter of our book, James and the Giant Peach, I'll see you then.